Now, just as a quick disclaimer, some of these are free, some of these are pay. We're really doing this based on quality as opposed to what's a cheap thrill. Some of them cost probably more than they should, but they're definitely good games. So without any further ado, at number 20 is Grim Valor. Now, Grim Valor is an action RPG side-scroller, a hack-and-slash platformer that really does a good job setting itself apart as something that really isn't, like, they don't do games like this. It seems dumb to say because it's just a platform game with action in it, but there's not enough of this on consoles and PC because this is a pretty damn well put-together version of that type of game. It's also free for the first act, which is about 2 hours of gameplay your first time around. Not bad. It's $6.99 for the full game, and it's available on iOS and Android now. At number 19 is Pascal's Wager, which is a dark fantasy action RPG that in truth has some of the better visuals of a lot of things that I've seen on mobile. It's currently an iOS-only game, which kind of sucks, but at the same time, it's something along the lines of, visually speaking at least, a Skyrim or a Witcher 3 look to it. It's a little bit better looking than Skyrim, though, obviously, which is really cool to say about a mobile game. The game itself has a great story and does a great job with boss battles as well. Pascal's Wager is $6.99 on iOS right now. At number 18 is Stardew Valley, which is perhaps one of the better games ever released. It's basically a take on the Harvest Moon formula that integrates some ideas from Minecraft and or Terraria, depending on where you come from. Stardew Valley is one of those games that just builds itself on its charm. It's incredibly fun. It's so easy to get absorbed in doing anything in this game. But as you build up your farm, it's also very rewarding to stick to basically what you're supposed to do. Stardew Valley is out on both iOS and Android now for $7.99. At number 17 is Dead Effect 2, which is a first-person sci-fi shooter, which, yes, does draw a lot of inspiration from both Dead Space and a little bit from Mass Effect. That being said, it is most certainly along the lines of a first-person shooter more so than a horror game. The visuals, yes, similar to both of those games in certain areas, but it's much more action-oriented. That being said, the upgrades and all of that type of stuff is a little bit more in-depth than you might expect. Dead Effect 2 is free on both iOS and Android. At number 16 is Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia, which is somewhere between Dissidia Final Fantasy and a more traditional JRPG. There's a little bit more there that will remind you of the more regular Final Fantasy, particularly the battle system. It's a little less like a brawler. It was co-developed by Square Enix and Team Ninja, and it is a fairly unique game. It is free to play, so it does have a lot of the trappings of that. However, it does have a lot of its own unique compromises between traditional JRPG and the more brawler-oriented Dissidia gameplay. Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia is out on iOS and Android now. It's free to play, like I said. At number 15 is Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons, which is an adventure game that will destroy your heart. It really is a game that takes its concept and incorporates it into both the story and the gameplay that really phenomenally feels coherent. I've spent a lot of time playing this game. I've beat it several times, and it just gut punches you. But it's not just a walking simulator or anything. It's got some great gameplay, some great puzzles. Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons is $2.99 on iOS and Android now. At number 14 is Animus Standalone, which is a game that definitely attempts in some ways to be Dark Souls, but not full bore. Aesthetically speaking, yes, they want you to think Dark Souls, but there are some key differences in the gameplay, but also some key similarities. It makes sure to have the combat more weight-oriented and not just arcadey hack and slash. It is a very fun game though. It's $3.99. It's out on iOS and Android. Check it out. At number 13 is The Wolf Among Us, Telltale's phenomenal story that is, in theory, probably one of the more original stories they have. It certainly does follow their typical format. It is an adventure game. It is basically a point and click that you have a little bit more control over, but it's really well done. The writing and everything else is phenomenal. You can really tell these are the people that did the Walking Dead series. All of the stuff that you love from the comics is here. Wolf Among Us Episode 1 is free. Other episodes are purchasable from in-game. It's out on iOS and Android right now. At number 12 is The School White Day, which is a remake of a Korean game called White Day, a labyrinth named School, from way back in the early 2000s. It's a game that was really well loved in South Korea, but had basically a cult following in other countries. It's been remade with 3D graphics. It is a very good-looking game. You're basically trapped in a school. The school is very creepy, and the goal is, of course, to survive. The School White Day is out on iOS and Android now. It's $6.99, and it's a pretty darn good game. At number 11 is Max Payne. That is right, Max Payne is on your phone. If you are a fan of the bullet time shooter with the bizarre, drug-oriented, psychedelic, insane story, and let me tell you that I definitely am, I was really excited to find out when they were going to put this on the phone, and they did a phenomenal job. For what Max Payne is, it controls very good for a phone. Also, again, this is a classic game that pretty much invented bullet time in games. There's not much else to say. If that sounds vaguely good to you, it's the granddaddy. Max Payne is out on iOS and Android now for $2.90. At number 10 is Implosion, Never Lose Hope. This is actually a game that I tried fairly recently, and it does a really good job of having a fairly unique touch control scheme. This is a game that just feels like it constantly has momentum. It does have a pretty alright story. For a mobile game, it has very good voice acting, and the execution of the story is quite good. But really, the main allure of it is upgrading your machine that you're up against the alien threat with. There's a lot to do as far as that goes. Maybe not the most I've ever seen in a game, but again, it's a mobile game and it's incredibly fun. It's hard to really rag on it too much because I have gone back to it since I tried it. Implosion Never Lose Hope is $9.99 on iOS and Android. At number 9 is Monument Valley 2, which is a puzzle platform game with beautiful graphics, amazing music, and while you could play Monument Valley 1, if you're only going to play one of them, play 2, it's a slightly better game. It is beautiful, like I said. I don't really know a lot to say other than it's probably one of the best puzzle games, period. Like, if it was out on console, I would own it immediately. It's out on iOS and Android right now for $4.99. And number 8 is the Talos Principle, which is a first-person puzzle game that will remind you very much of kind of Portal combined with Myst, if that makes any sense. If you've never played Myst, it's like one of the first-person puzzle games that had particularly mystical and pretty graphics like this game does. However, obviously it's a lot more fluid than that game. That game was all pre-rendered. This is purely a first-person game, and yes, it will remind you of Portal, albeit without the Portal gun. It's that kind of puzzle, though. The Talos Principle is out on both iOS and Android now for $4.99. It's a damn good game. At number 7 is Bully, the classic Rockstar game. Bully is, of course, fighting your way up a school hierarchy where you play pranks, make problems, beat people up, and it's a Rockstar game. It's obviously funny and tongue-in-cheek as well. We all still want Bully 2, but to have Bully in our pocket is not a bad thing. It's out on iOS and Android now for $6.99. At number 6 is The Room 3. Now, The Room are pretty much puzzle box games with a pretty mysterious story, and they do a really good job. They do create an atmosphere that I would say most of those types of games try to, but don't necessarily completely do it. I think the third is probably the best of the three, the most concise at least, and it has some pretty clever puzzles. Although, I will say, by the third, you're fairly familiar with what to do. The Room 3 is $3.99. It's out on iOS and Android now. And number 5 is the Grand Theft Auto trilogy. And for $12, you get the 3 big Grand Theft Auto games: Grand Theft Auto 3, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, and Grand Theft Auto Vice City. These are just some of the best games ever made. There's no question about it. And they play really well on phones. In fact, really just all of the Rockstar ports are incredibly worth getting. Considering this is $12 for, like I said, some of the best games ever made, this is probably the best value. I highly recommend this. The Grand Theft Auto trilogy is out on iOS and Android right now for $11.99. At number 4 is Exiled Kingdoms, an RPG that's isometric and brings back a lot of what you see in classic isometric JRPGs. I mean, in a lot of ways, it's a pretty quintessential CRPG, what we used to call them back in the 90s. The free version contains about 30 hours, which is a lot, but there is way more if you buy the full version. That can be done from inside the game. It's not expensive. Exiled Kingdom is out on iOS and Android right now. At number 3 is XCOM Enemy Within, which was a standalone expansion to XCOM Enemy Unknown. Way back in the day, it cost a lot more than this. And let's just be frank, it's probably one of the best strategy RPGs you're gonna play. It's turn-based, it's pretty self-explanatory, it's got great graphics, great story. There's not a lot you can say about XCOM that is negative, and it's very faithfully ported with a great interface that feels just right for playing on mobile. XCOM Enemy Within is out on iOS and Android now for $4.99. At number 2 is Another Eden. Another Eden is a JRPG. It has a pretty distinct pseudo 3D style to it, and despite not really specifically being exactly a Squaresoft RPG, it really manages to sort of ape the feel of it and actually capture the magic. Now again, it's pretty different. There's a lot of side-scrolling, side perspective-based stuff, but if you like that type of game, I think you will like Another Eden. It's out on iOS and Android now. It is free. And finally, at number 1, it's Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, which you cannot go wrong with Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. It's a BioWare title, it is an RPG, it's very much along the lines of an older RPG, but crosses the line into BioWare territory when we talk about dialogue, when we talk characters, writing, etc. It just knocks it out of the park. Few games are as good as the 2 Coder games, and the first one is probably necessary to play story-wise in order to play the second. A lot of people say otherwise, but I think it's better to have seen both. It's out right now on iOS and Android for $9.99. Also, just a quick bonus for you, Chrono Trigger is of course one of the best JRPGs of all time, if not the best. It really depends on who you're talking to. I'm of the mind that Final Fantasy 6 and 7 are both a little bit, and when I say a little bit, I only mean a marginally tiny amount better. But Chrono Trigger is such a good game. It's got such a good story, the themes, the dialogue, everything is executed so well, and I love the battle system in it. Chrono Trigger is $9.99 on iOS and Android. Play it if you haven't. I mean, it's the best of the Super Nintendo ones, other than Final Fantasy VI, and sometimes I feel like it's better than Final Fantasy VI. I flip-flop. But if that's not enough time wasted for you, I don't know what to say.